been a minute. Listen, October was a month and I read just a little bit, and I also disappeared from YouTube for like 2 weeks. It's November, which means it's October reading wrap-up time. Oh my god, my eyes are gonna start watering right now, like as I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to hide the fact that my eye's watering, so I put my glasses on. But anyways, my name is Maura. If you're new, if you're not new, welcome back. I know I disappeared for like 2 weeks, but I'm gonna try to like reel it in and be focused and actually get this done because I don't want to be a slacker. Like I was saying, October was a month. I was really busy and then stressed out and had no time to read. I was forcing myself to read, and then all of the books that I was reading I did not care about except like maybe 1 or 2. So I don't know how long this video is actually gonna be because I don't know how many books I read that were actually like anything that I enjoyed. So I was on hockey romance book kick. As you guys know, that's literally like my pride and joy. I have to say I wasn't too successful with my hockey books though. The first one that I read was called Body Check by Tegan Hunter. Okay, this is the first book in the Seattle Serpents series, and I wound up giving this 2 stars. It's about Auden, who is very rich and she owns a bunch of hotels. The main guy, what's his name? I don't even remember. Hutch. Well, Hutchinson I think is his last name, and then they just call him Hutch. God forbid on a sports team they like actually call each other their name. But anyways, so it starts out with Hutch and Auden in the airport at like the airport bar. They're both kind of like anxious about flying, and then they end up getting on the flight and realizing like they're kind of like around each other again, and then they have to do an emergency landing. They end up staying at the same hotel that night, and then they end up hooking up. One thing that I did like about it was every time they'd like run into each other, they'd always be like strike one, because like saying that they were like following each other, so they'd be like strike 1, strike 2, and I just thought that was like cool for the tension. I will say, however, I felt like Hutch was just really dumb. Like, I felt like he was stupid. They'd go to these hotels that literally are called the Sinclair, and her last name is Sinclair. Like, all of the employees are like kind of on their toes about everything with her being there because they obviously like want everything to be done right. He just like had no clue that she was who she was. I don't know, I felt like he was dumb. I'm pretty sure what it was is the hockey team is like sponsored by the Sinclair hotels, so she ends up working with him a lot, and like all of the hotels that she owns, the hockey team is ending up staying in, so they're like always around each other. It's kind of like workplace romance, but not fully. I feel like that's just kind of like a very small subplot, because that's not really the whole point of it. It's like more of the fact that they just like keep running into each other, and like they don't know where these connections are coming from until they end up realizing that her hotels are sponsoring his team. Did I write notes about this? Because I don't remember why I gave it 2 stars. I remember not loving it, but I don't know if there was something that really stuck out. Okay, oh, I gave this 1.5. I said he ends up thinking that she's his good luck charm because he always does well at games that she's at. That's like normal hockey romance stuff. Like I feel like in a sports romance that's not out of the ordinary. I just felt like half of the plot was like so unnecessary. I felt like there was so much filler that just didn't need to be there, and I was wasting so much time reading it. They had no connection other than physical, and randomly he was like, she's my good luck charm, I need her there all the time, but there was nothing emotional there. Like I felt like they didn't really have anything other than just them hooking up one night. Yeah, they basically hooked up and then decided they were in love. I feel like if they would have had an emotional connection, then it would have been different, but like something about them hooking up and then them just being in the same spot and him being like, she's my good luck charm, so obviously now like I have to be in love with her, it felt so forced. It didn't feel like there was actually anything of romance there. It felt like he just was like, well, she's my good luck charm, which means I also have to be in love with her, and that's just like not really how it works. So that was the first one I read, and I actually wound up reading that on October 18th. So I didn't read a book for like 3 weeks. The next book I read, I DNF'd, and I really like, it makes me so angry because I feel like I have a book that I DNF in every single wrap up. I genuinely like, I could not read this book. I'm amazed, truly. Like I try so hard to be like really nice about my reviews, but I'm truly amazed at like the fact that this book has almost a 4-star rating, because I personally found it vile. Like it was rancid, and I genuinely like could not read this book. So basically this book is called Pucked by Helena Hunting, and you know what, I've seen a lot of TikTokers and people with book accounts just posting about like hockey books to read, and they always talk about this one, so I was like, oh cool, like I'll read it. Wish I didn't. Like really wish I could just take something and scrub my brain, because I felt sick after this. I don't even really remember, like I genuinely tried to forget as much as I could about this book, and I did not write notes about it because I was just like in awe of how this was published. That's so mean. But I'm just gonna go off of like what the summary says for you in the synopsis. It says, with a famous NHL player for a stepbrother, Violet Hall is well acquainted with the playboy reputation of many hockey stars. So of course she isn't interested when legendary captain Alex Waters or his pretty beat up face and rock hard six-pack abs. Why did they include that? Like, please listen to this this is one sentence, okay? When Alex inadvertently obliterates Violet's misapprehension regarding the inferior intellect of hockey players. Can we speak English? Point is, she ends up being like, oh, I don't like hockey players, and he, with his six-pack abs, is like, actually you do. And she's like, no, I don't. So then they just end up hooking up. Suffering with a complete lapse of judgment, Violet discovers how good Alex is with the hockey stick in his pants. Like, I don't know. I honestly, like, the rest of the synopsis doesn't sound awful, but the writing and the things they would say and just like how things were expressed was not my thing at all. Like, I could not do it. I was literally genuinely sitting there reading it and like, I wish you could have seen my face. I just couldn't do it. Like, I felt ill. I could not, and so I stopped. And I'm not gonna force myself to read because why am I gonna put myself through pain? Okay, so that was over. So I wound up reading That One Night by Emily Rath, the prequel novella to the Pucking Around series. So this is 100 pages. I gave it 3 stars. Really liked it. Less than 100 pages. It's really focused on the 2 main characters in, well, there's a bunch of main characters actually in that series, but we'll get into that later. But it's about Rachel and Jake. So it takes place in Seattle. Rachel and Jake are the 2 main characters in this, and they end up at the same hotel. She was there for her brother's wedding, and then he was there because he was supposed to meet up with his sister, and then like she didn't show up for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe they mentioned it and I just didn't remember, but whatever. And they end up hooking up, of course. Like, I feel like that's the only thing that I'm gaining out of this month is just like, let's just like, genuinely, there's one book where that doesn't happen, and when you see what that book is, you're gonna laugh because it's an autobiography. So they're both like, oh, I don't do hookups, like all that kind of thing, and then they obviously end up doing it, realizing like they are fully obsessed with each other, and then they end up going no contact. She ends up leaving, not leaving her number or anything, and they truly think they're never gonna see each other again. They don't even know each other's names. They both have like a history and a background that the other person doesn't know about. I gave it 3 stars. Like, I genuinely liked it. I thought it was cool. I thought it was good. Then again, I was like, I don't feel like I can rate this more than 3 stars because it's a novella and it's a prequel, so I don't really know anything else, but I did enjoy it, and I was really excited for the rest of the series. I'm actually gonna skip over the next book that I read in that month because I took a break between the 2 books, but I feel like I should just continue talking about the series. I read another book. I'm gonna come back to it, but I wound up reading the first book in the Pucking Around Jacksonville Rays series by Emily Rath. I gave this 1 star, and I think this was generous. I think if I could, I would have given it 0. This book, 800 pages, and when I tell you 95% of it was the most intense smut I've ever read in my life, I was amazed at how I continued to read it and continued to fight through, because 800 pages. Rachel works in sports medicine and ends up working for the Jacksonville Rays, which is Jake's hockey team. The equipment manager goes to pick her up from the airport and then finds out that that's actually his next door neighbor, and his name is Caleb. Caleb is Jake's best friend. They end up kind of having a thing for each other before she realizes that Jake is also on that hockey team. Doesn't this sound so enticing and exciting? It just becomes a 3-way relationship, and then somebody else gets added into it. She literally is just like in love with 3 or 4 different guys on the hockey team, and they're all in love with her, and instead of like her choosing, she's like, well, I'll just have them all. So she's literally like in relationships with all of them. It's just a lot. I could not do it. It was not for me, but I continued to read it because I was like, I just have to see how this ends, and I can't DNF another book because I felt like it was so ridiculous that I needed to know like how it could possibly end. So I did, and I wish I hadn't. It's the only other 2 books I read this month were physicals. Those were all Kindle Unlimited books. I read Wildfire by Hannah Grace. I was so ridiculously excited for this book to come out. I'm sure everybody's already heard about it. I tabbed it up a ton. I'll give the short summary of it, which is that Aurora and Russ end up hooking up at a party, kind of like a going away college graduation party, and then they end up both working at a summer camp that they both like kind of grew up going to. They have a lot of their own family dramas and just like things that they're dealing with, but somehow they end up kind of being parallel to each other's lives and realizing that they're helping each other a lot. I just found that this book, this is what I needed this month, is what I'm trying to say. This book is exactly what I needed. It was sweet, it was cute, I loved it. I think I gave this 4 stars. I'm a huge fan of Icebreaker by Hannah Grace, and I gave that 5 stars. This one didn't give me the same feeling things as Icebreaker. I feel like I liked the characters in Icebreaker more. I think this was like a really cute, sweet, soft romance that I really needed, and I was so excited for this one. And then apparently she has a third one coming out. I think it's about Henry, and it's coming out June 4th, my birthday weekend. Don't quote me, but that's what Goodreads says. We'll see if that's true. But I really liked this one. I've seen everybody talk about it and say how much they loved it. I'm obsessed with her writing. I feel like she writes very real characters, and she talks about things that are very like current, but I feel like it's not cringy. You know when people talk about like TikTok and books and it's like, okay, don't really like that. Like, I feel like Hannah Grace talks about a lot of relevant and current things in her books, but it's done in a way that's like sophisticated and not like I'm embarrassed to be a part of this generation. Really enjoyed this one. And then the last book that I read, I don't have a bookmark like sitting in it randomly, but I did finish this. It is Dave Gurls' autobiography. I've had this for a long time. I think like a year. I got it for Christmas last year, and I'd been reading it on and off for a year. I just never got around to finishing it because I couldn't force myself to sit down and like read an autobiography, and I love him, so I didn't want to like bore myself with it if I wasn't in the mood to read it. I knew I would enjoy reading this, and I did, so I'm glad I waited even though it took me forever to finish it. That's simply because if I'm doing schoolwork and I'm like overwhelmed with like things I have to do in my life, I don't want to read nonfiction. I want to read something that's like not real so that I feel like I'm somewhere else and I can like remove myself from current day and go and read a fictional book. So reading nonfiction when I'm like overwhelmed with tasks is not really my cup of tea. I didn't rate this because it's somebody's life, so it's like kind of really messed up. Could you imagine if I was like 2 stars and it's like literally his life story? Like, that's not fair. I didn't rate this. I really enjoyed it. I feel like some autobiographies that I've read, I don't want to like critique them, but at the same time it's like I've read some that just felt like they were really dragged out and like we're talking about elements of their life that like I don't want to say don't matter, but like, you know how like I feel like you read an autobiography and there's like one key detail or at least like point in this person's life that like you need to have in this book. Like there's an element that you're like expecting to be in there, and I felt like here there like literally every like major detail of this man's life like I read, and I just loved it. I felt like it was so entertaining. It was really sad at times, but I love him, so this was nice. Finally finished it, so that was exciting. But that's everything I read this month. I read like maybe 6 or 7 books. It was not my finest moment. That's everything that I read this month. Wasn't too exciting. Honestly read like 2 books that were actually exciting and happy and I actually enjoyed reading. Otherwise, I felt like I was in a slump because the books that I was reading I was not really a fan of. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys when I see you.